Good afternoon and welcome. Today I'm going to be wearing two hats. My first hat that I'm wearing is for the Cleveland Humanities Festival. The Cleveland Humanities Festival is a collaborative event celebrating the great cultural institutions of our city and Northeast Ohio, dedicated to humanistic inquiry. Founded in 2016 and coordinated by the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities of Case Western Reserve University, the festival partners with the region's major museums, festival partners, educational institutions, art organizations, and the smaller local organizations offering diversity. The theme for the 2022 Cleveland Humanities Festival is discourse, which allows participants to examine how we communicate with one another, including the dialogue within and between local communities, cultural institutions, corporations, and other key sites of social exchange. Now for my other hat. My name is Reverend Anita Kazarian of the Cleveland Buddhist Temple, and I'm here to introduce today's speaker for the Cleveland Humanities Festival. Reverend Caitlin Mesher-Mace is a Jodo Shinshu Honganji-ha priest and a Kaikyoshi-ho minister of the Tri-State Denver Buddhist Temple in Denver, Colorado. She is completing her Master of Divinity in Buddhist Studies at the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley, California. Reverend Caitlin has worked since 2017 as a paramedic in the Front Range of Colorado, where she still works, when not in the temple, on a 9/11-based ambulance service. She is a nationally board-certified as flight and technical paramedic. Before entering the Buddhist ministry, Caitlin was a graduate of the Colorado School of Mines with a degree in mechanical engineering and worked for 12 years in production enhancement in unconventional resource extraction. She holds 3 U.S. and international patents, has published 5 times in industry journals, and was a co-keynote author at the 2011 Society of Petroleum Engineers World Annual Technical Conference. In addition, she was a member of the Team USA for the Australian Rules Football and competed in the 2014 International Cup World Championships in Melbourne, Australia. She is a multi-time U.S. champion in Australian rules football and Gaelic football. Reverend Caitlin and her wife Karen were married in 2010 in Kingston, Ontario, prior to legalization of same-sex marriage in the United States. Reverend Caitlin and Karen have been vocal and active members of the LGBTQ plus community, working for equity and equality across spaces. Please join me in giving Reverend Caitlin a warm welcome.
I will say one of the most awkward things you can have is to listen to your own biography and be within like 5 feet of it when it's happening. So my name is Reverend Caitlin Kongo Mesher-Mace. I am a Jodo Shinshu Honganji-ha priest. I was ordained in 2019 in Kyoto, Japan, actually with Anita. We were actually ordained together at the same time. It's pretty rare for Americans to get to go over to Japan and go through ordinations, which is an arduous process that involves testing for weeks. We were sequestered in a temple for 2 weeks, tested nonstop, 24/7, 24/7 through that entire time. So I was very lucky to have Anita here, the head minister of the Cleveland Buddhist Temple, to both be my friend in that experience, the friend in the Dharma, and also to invite me here to Case Western Reserve University and to speak here at the Cleveland Humanities Festival. So thank you guys so much for coming, listening. And today I'm going to be talking about LGBTQI existence and how it works intersectionality between that community and Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. So full disclosure, in order for me to have this conversation with you, you have to know who I am. So Anita gave you part of the conversation, but I'm going to give you the rest. I'm super gay. All right, that was easy. I'm a member of the LGBTQI plus community. It's a word salad at this point. It keeps getting longer. It was LGB when I started, and then it became T, which is add-on, which is great. Then it's Q and it's I, but we'll keep working. And it's going to keep getting longer because inclusion is important. So the more people we include within those acronyms, the more people feel that they are welcomed in spaces. And to get to that, I want to talk about the concept of acceptance within religious spaces, because I am a religious leader. And why I decided to become a religious leader after a very productive career in petroleum engineering. So let me decode what Anita was talking about. Y'all ever heard of hydraulic fracturing? I was a frac engineer. I helped design a lot of that technology. So I am literally evil. So if you enjoy a little natural gas and oil, I'm the one that went ahead and tore the earth apart so you guys can get that. So, but I had first learned and heard the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist teachings in 2012 after being engaged with Buddhism from 2005 on when I was at university at the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. And I was like, you know what? I really think Buddhism is the path for me. And I engaged with the Jodo Shinshu teachings and it really spoke with me. So why would the Jodo Shinshu teachings speak and be loud and be something that I'm willing to change away from hydraulic fracturing and making boatloads of money, doing that, to being a mostly poor paramedic, because I have to work as a paramedic to offset my income so I can keep being a priest, teaching Buddhism. And so I'm going to tell you why. So first off, I grew up in a mixed Lutheran and Hispanic Catholic family. Rather, my family was Lutheran, and I went to Catholic school. So I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico, originally. And you can't exist in Santa Fe without existing in Catholicism. The entire town is nothing but one big Catholic experience, which is great because the history is rich, it's large. I remember as a child watching pilgrimages come through my town where people are literally dragging crosses on their back, bleeding, passing out in the street because that was an act of devotion for them. And in that way, it's very beautiful. But being the giant homo that I am, it wasn't super comfortable. And so I didn't feel welcomed within these Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic-based religious traditions that often told me, you know, I'm not that great. So in the process of trying to figure out how to give this talk, I went and did some research. So the research firm Pew, I'm sure you guys have all heard of Pew polls before. Pew, right? Yeah, Pew, P-E-W. They did a poll in 2015. Religious acceptance of LGBT people in the United States. And so I've got some stats here. In 2015, this percentage accept and think that LGBT people should be accepted in society and part of their lives. 70% of Catholics believe that LGBT people should be accepted and be part of their circle in their lives. 62% of Orthodox Christians, 71% of Hindus, 81% of Jewish people, 83% of people who are non-religious thought that being LGBT was okay. 66% of mainline Protestants, 51% of historically black church members, so your Southern Baptists and any of the historically black churches, 45% of Muslims, 36% of Mormons, 36% of evangelicals, and 16% of Jehovah's Witnesses thought that being LGBTQI+ was okay. The kicker here, coming in first place, 88% of Buddhists thought that being LGBTQ+ is okay. Now, where that other 12% is, that's a larger conversation that has to do with cultural stereotypes and how Buddhism assimilated into other cultures. And if you want to have that discussion afterwards, I'd be super happy to have it with you, but that would be a PhD dissertation in itself. When it came to the subject of LGBT marriage, we see a downward slide. So 57% of Catholics in 2015 said, yeah, gay people should be allowed to marry. 77% of Jews, 54% of those in the Orthodox churches, 40% in the historically black churches, 42% in the Muslim faith, 68% in the Hindu faith, 28% in the evangelical Christian faith, 78% of those that are none, and 84% of Buddhists believe, yes, LGBT people should get married. The slide of that 4% within Buddhists comes down to the concept of marriage existing at all. more than likely, as a lot of Buddhists don't view that anyone should be allowed to get married. That's, once again, part of the larger conversation that we're actually going to touch on. A 2017 survey of transgendered rights. I think this is an important thing to touch on as well. And this is, has society gone too far in accepting trans people? So the numbers I'm going to give you are the percentage of people who feel that society has gone too far in their acceptance of transgendered people. So 39% of Christians, when put in a giant box, so all these groups put together, 39% feel that rights are too far and we've been too permissive of transgendered people. That includes 44% of Protestants felt that way, 33% of white mainline churches, 29% of black Protestant mainline churches, 27% of Catholics felt that way. So we're way below the 39% with the Catholics. But 61% of white evangelicals felt that we had surpassed the amount of rights that we should be giving or the amount of nice things we should be doing for people that are transgendered. 16% of atheists and nuns thought we had surpassed that as well. So we're looking at 84% of non-religious people viewing that like we haven't done enough yet. But 16% felt we had done too much. I'm like, all right, these are interesting statistics, but these are how non-LGBT people feel about LGBT people. So how do LGBT people feel about religious people? And being a religious person, I find that this is like a very important thing, you know, because I am both gay and religious. So what do we do? So the amount of, this is from a 2013 Pew survey. There is not one more recent. So this is the survey of LGBT people and how it relates to religion. So 27% of people within the larger alphabet soup define themselves as Protestant, where 49% of those that define themselves as heterosexual define themselves as Protestant, and within this polling group. 14% define themselves as Catholic in the gay side, 22% on the straight side. 2% of people define themselves as Jewish on both the gay side and on the straight side. So we see parity for the first time. And then we get into the others, religions that are not based in Abrahamic tradition. 8% of LGBT people define themselves in this non-Abrahamic window, and 4% of non-LGBT people. So that's where we see more LGBT people are defining themselves in non-Abrahamic traditions versus the heterosexual people. And then 48% of LGBT people saw themselves as religiously unaffiliated, where only 20% of straight people did. That definitely switches when you get through age groups. So those between 18 and 29, 60% of LGBT people between 18 and 29 saw themselves as unaffiliated, where only 31% of the general populace saw themselves as unaffiliated within that age group. So the younger you are, the queerer you are, the less likely you are to engage with religion. Okay, so then we ask, is religion important? Is religion important? 59% of the general population says, yes, religion is important in my everyday life. Religion is important for me to live a full and healthy life. 20% of LGBT people said it's important. So there's a huge gap. Religion then becomes non-important for this large group of people. Okay. And this, I thought, was one of the most interesting statistics. How do LGBT people view different faith groups? So these stats I'm going to give you are unfriendly or unfavorable views towards different faith groups. So 83% of people in LGBT, defining as LGBT, view the Mormon Church in an unfavorable light. 79% view the Catholic Church in an unfavorable light. 73% view the Evangelical Church in an unfavorable light. 47% view the Jewish Church in an unfavorable light. And 44% view the Protestant Church in an unfavorable light. And 84% view Islam in an unfavorable light. 10% view both, and this is the highest statistic out of all those. It did not include any non-Abrahamic faiths. 10% view both Judaism and mainline white Protestantism in a favorable light from the LGBT side in 2013. So very few people within the LGBT community in 2013 viewed any religion in a favorable way. Now, of these statistics, and I have no answer for this, I found it really interesting that Islam actually views pretty positively on a whole, like near 50% towards gay marriage and the acceptance of gay people, and yet it is the most feared religion for LGBT people from the populace. I don't have an answer for that, I just thought it was an interesting statistic. Same with Catholicism. Catholicism, of all Christian denominations, actually was the most positive on a whole towards LGBT people, including marriage and acceptance, but actually was the most negative mainline LGBT, or mainline Christian tradition to be viewed. And growing up within the New Mexican Catholic Church, I actually never really got sweated that much. Like, I was pretty clear that I wasn't like for that place, but I had out gay teachers in my high school in the 90s. So like, my view on it's always going to be a little bit skewed. My wife also went to Catholic school, and she has a bit of a different, more traditional view because she was in Long Island and I was in New Mexico. So worlds apart. But that comes back to, all right, so where does Jodo Shinshu Buddhism land in this? And for those of you who don't know, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is a school of Pure Land Buddhism, so Mahayan Buddhism. So we're like working off the Chinese, Mongolian, North Central Korean, and Japanese schools. Those are almost all Mahayan schools. And it's part of the Pure Land tradition within that. And so one of the key aspects of the Pure Land tradition, and I'm going to be reading a little bit of scripture as we're going, although scripture's not actually the right word, but we're going to just use it because English doesn't really work great for Buddhist teaching always. One of the key things is that we view ourselves in a period of time right now called Mappo. Mappo. And so Mappo basically means it's been like 2,500 years since the historical Buddha passed. So it's been a hot minute. And have you guys ever played telephone before, like in kindergarten? Like, I'm going to tell you banana on that side, and over on this side, it's going to be like, I don't know, a math equation. Like, that's how much of a slide we're getting. And so Pure Land Buddhists often sit and go, you know, it's been that long since the Buddha was alive. We've probably played a bit of telephone. So we need to acknowledge that. And so we call ourselves, like, this period of history we call the degenerate Dharma, Mappo. And so like we need to simplify Buddhist teachings because things are a little out on the limb at this point. So this is a writing from Master Dao Cho. And Dao Cho is one of the Pure Land masters, one of the lineage masters that form the school, which I'm a priest in. And Dao Cho says this. Master Dao Cho explains, the Great Collection Sutra states that in the last Dharma age, that's this one, out of all sentient beings who seek to perform practices and accomplish the way, not one will gain realization. To awaken aspiration and perform practices in this world is the path of sages and is termed self-power. The present is the last Dharma age. It is the world of the 5 defilements. The Pure Land way alone affords passage. Wrongdoing and evil acts in the present age are incessant and are like violent winds in terrestrial rains. Through the universal primal vow, we are brought to say the name. This name is for the sake of all sentient beings of defilement and evil. Hence, the Buddhas encourage us to follow the Pure Land path. Though we may commit evil all our lives, Shinjin of the 3 aspects in correspondence with the name is the mind that is single. The mind that is single is the genuine mind and is in accord with reality. Any assertion that we will be born is clearly baseless. We will necessarily attain birth in the land of happiness, and thereupon realize that birth and death is itself great nirvana. This is the path of easy practice. It is termed other power. That is really wordy and difficult, and I expect none of you guys to understand it. It took me like 5 years in graduate school to like start to understand what I just read, but it's important. Give me 1 second. It's not beer, it's actually green tea. Basically what Master Dao Cho here is saying is that we live in a really difficult world. And one thing that Jodo Shinshu Buddhism doesn't try to do, so this school of Buddhism that both Anita and I are priests in, I'm not your ethical guide. I can't tell you what good and evil are. And so most religions will try to tell you, this is a good action and this is a bad action. So what Dao Cho here is saying is, you literally can't do good actions, because we couldn't tell the difference between what good is on a global sense and what evil is on a global sense, because we can't see past ourselves. And so there's good and evil in that, like, I probably shouldn't step on this cat's tail for fun. Like, that's just messed up, right? But at the same time, like, what if I donate money to the Salvation Army? And I did this a lot growing up, right? Like, they're ringing the bell out there, they're ringing the bell, and I'm like, oh, the guy's ringing the bell, I'm gonna put my 1 quarter in there, and I'm gonna feel really great at Christmas time, right? Yeah, they hate gay people. So I was literally donating against myself. But 6-year-old Katie didn't know that. And so this is like, I couldn't tell you that this was a good or an evil act. I couldn't tell you, I can't see past myself. So in the moment, like, I donated something good, and I'm sure they probably did something good with it, but it wouldn't have been for me if I needed it. And so our world is so large, I can't see good and evil. I can't see good and evil. And so Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, this is one of the key aspects for us, is we're looking at the world around us and we're saying, okay, so if I can't see good and evil, how do I exist in it and how do I be included in it? And that's where I'm going to get into this next piece, written by Shinran Shonin, the founder of our school. So this is written by a Chinese guy in the 400s, 500s, and now we're getting to Japan in 1200. And Shinran Shonin writes this: the lowly, such as butchers and wine dealers, in an instant transcend birth and death and attain Buddhahood. This must be called that which is for all people of the world most difficult to accept. Butcher are those who earn a living by killing. Wine dealers are those who make and sell liquor. Such evil people, simply through their 10 utterances, are able to transcend and attain birth. Is this not difficult to accept? Okay, so context. It's 1200 in Japan, and a traditional form of Buddhism has been practiced for the last 400, 500 years. And that has said you have to be a really, really, really good person to reach enlightenment. So I can't do things like be a butcher. I can't work with death, because if I'm working with death, I'm stained with death. I can't sell booze, because I'm giving you booze, I'm making you drunk, and you're not going to be like good, because we make bad decisions when we're, selling wine or drinking wine or maybe having one too many wine coolers. And so these are people that were shunned to the side of society. These are people that are outside on the side of society. And Shinran Shonin, the founder of our school, says, nah, it's cool. Y'all are part of our entire thing. You don't get to be outside of the religious experience just because you're not the part of society that everyone says is okay. The Buddhist teachings are not so narrow that you are not part of this. So we now have a world that is broken. Like, our entire worldview is a world that is broken. And then we have a religion, and the religion says, no, that's fine. You can be part of this broken world. You're not left outside of it. Because let's be honest, we need butchers, we need grave diggers, we need people that work with blood and death and sadness. And as a paramedic, I can tell you, like, I work with blood and death and sadness. Like, I would be a dirty person back then, because I'm there when people die. I'm there when all these things happen. So the other thing that Shinran Shonin is famous for is Shinran Shonin, at the time that he became a Buddhist priest, most all sexual relationships were on the DL. And I'll translate that for anyone that's not quite my age group. On the down low, you ain't supposed to be super open about, say, hey, man, she's cute, what's up? Like, we weren't doing that, right? And so Shinran, being a Buddhist priest for 20 years, he was 28 years old. He had been on this big monastery for 20 years. And he was like, yeah, no, I kind of want to hook up. I kind of want to, spend my life with somebody. I want to share. I want to like live. I want to understand what life is. If I'm completely always cloistered away, how can I understand what this is that I'm trying to escape? How can I actually understand what suffering is if I don't suffer? How can I understand what suffering is if I don't have joy? It's duality. Like, you don't know that you're in the light until you see your shadow. That sort of thing. And so Shinran, being a Buddhist priest and being part of this larger tradition and having a great teacher over him, was like, so I'm gonna leave the monastery, and I found this girl, and she's cute and well connected, and we're gonna hook up and have kids. And so he did. And this is one of the many things that got him banished from his monastery. And so he gets banished, he gets sent up to northern Japan, and he's married to this woman, and they have several kids, and she actually ends up being the founder of our school. It's a really great story. It's a great love story because it's her that makes the school exist to this day. It wasn't him. But the end of it is, we all are real people that live. We are all real people that live. So Jodo Shinshu Buddhism becomes a type of Buddhism for everybody. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, in this entire movement that happens during this Kamakura period of Japan, like 1100, 1200, is bringing Buddhism out off the mountain. So before that, all the Buddhism, they're in these giant cloistered like temples and everything else. And Shinran, along with some other people, Honen Shonin and Nichiren, and then your Zen schools actually come down at the same time. Dogen and all those people bring Buddhism off the mountain into the people. Because everybody can be touched by the Buddhist teachings. Everyone can be touched by the Buddhist teachings. So Shinran goes out and he spends the rest of his life, because he's like 28, 29, 30, 31 at this time, and he lives to like his late 80s, early 90s, and he spends the rest of his life telling everybody, you can be Buddhist, right? And they're like, yeah, but I can't because like, I'm a gravedigger. He's like, no. See, that's your limitations, not the teaching's limitations. What kind of religion would it be if we're like, sorry, you're just, as a human, your evil overcomes our religion. Like, that doesn't even seem right to me. And so Shinran goes around and tells everyone like, no, you're good. And that comes to the third part of what the actual practice of Jodo Shinshu is, and like why I became a Buddhist priest. And so that is back here. I have coffee stirring straws marking all my pages, so it's really great. This is the Tani show. So the Tani show is recorded when Shinran's like near death, and he's talking to one of his followers, because by this time he's actually really famous. When I wrote the last thing I read, he was kind of not super famous, and now he's like super famous and well known, and this is one of his followers. And this is a saying he talks to, because you hear like, if you're a really good person, you're gonna be like born in the Pure Land, you're gonna be a good Buddhist, like rebirth's gonna be amazing, right? And Shinran's like, says this: even a good person attains birth in the Pure Land, so it goes without saying that an evil person will. Though it is so, people commonly say, even an evil person attains birth, so it goes without saying that a good person will. This statement may seem well-founded at first, but it runs counter to the intent of the primal vow, which is other power. This is because people who rely on doing good through their self-power fail to entrust themselves wholeheartedly to other power, and therefore are not in accord with Amita's primal vow. But when they overturn the mind of self-power and entrust themselves to the other power, they will attain birth in the true and fulfilled land. It is impossible for us, who are possessed of blind passions, to free ourselves from birth and death through any practice whatever. Sorrowing at this, Amita made the vow, and the essential intent of which is the evil person's attainment of Buddhahood. Hence, evil person who entrusts themselves to the other power are precisely the ones who possess the true cause of birth. Accordingly, he said, even the good person is born in the Pure Land. Without question is the person who is evil. So our sect of Buddhism then says the target of our teachings, the target of our school, isn't the good person. Isn't the good person. Because the good person's good. They don't need us. It's the evil person. Now, anyone that sits and says, I'm the good person, is delusional. Absolutely delusional. We are all the evil person. We are all the evil person. So what Jodo Shinshu Buddhism encourages us to do is to look in the mirror. And we have a word called bombu. Bombu. And bombu means foolish person. It more means evil person, but English in the word evil isn't really great, because when we say evil, we're thinking like more catastrophically huge evil, where this is more like, I took the last piece of cheese evil, or I cut someone off and made them late for their work and I didn't even know it evil. So we're going to go with foolish. So Jodo Shinshu Buddhism says, look in the mirror and see yourself as the foolish person. And to be the foolish person, that just means I am the ignorant person. I am ignorant to all the things that I do and how they relate to each other. So for me, to sit and tell someone, guy, if you love another guy, that's evil. How would I know? I'm the ignorant person. If you don't vote this way or vote that way, that's evil. Man, I don't know. I'm the ignorant person. They know. They need to look in the mirror. They need to figure it out. But Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, everyone is equal in that everyone is evil. Everyone is bombu. Everyone is at the same level. And so for us, marriage has never been an issue. We've been marrying straight people and gay people for the entire time we've been marrying people, because we actually don't marry people. See, that's a self-fulfilling thing there. Marriage isn't really a thing in Buddhism. It's not a sacrament. It's not something we've concerned ourselves with. It's not religious. Religious marriage is a Abrahamic tradition in a lot of ways. And there is some Dharmatic traditions and the Hindu traditions as well, but it has more to do with tying families together and tying karma together than it does like tying this is a sacred act. And so for Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, because Buddhist monks before Shinran didn't get married, there was no tradition in getting married. It just was. Like, okay, yeah, you're married, cool. If you're not married, cool. In fact, at the time that Shinran got married, it was matrilineal marriage anyways. So the husband moved into the wife's home and followed the wife's family up. Now, there was a change in that 50 to 100 years after him, and you actually see that's due to an influence within Chinese culture and applications of Confucianism and some other stuff that happened in Japan at that time, and that's a very interesting historical period of time. However, prior to the Tokugawa shogunate, so that gap there between the beginning of the Kamakura period and where the Tokugawa shogunate, but that is, once again, a history class, and I'll teach that some other time. But this leads us to LGBT people and Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. How do we circle that square? And the answer is we don't actually have to. Because there was never a moment that LGBT people weren't accepted religiously into Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Culturally is another story. Because it's impossible for us to deal with Japanese culture today, and everything that we do in Jodo Shinshu is steeped in Japanese culture, without divorcing what happened in both the MacArthur Constitution of 1947 and the Meiji Restoration in the 1860s, both of which had a huge influence on Japanese morality and culture prior to what we have now. So any real hatred towards LGBT stuff comes out of that MacArthur Constitution, which actually defined marriages between a man and a woman. Thank you, General MacArthur. And what happened during the Meiji Restoration, introduction of applied Christianity and applied Protestantism in Japan in the 1860s. But religiously, doctrinally, we have no problems because it doesn't matter. it doesn't matter because we are all foolish people. We are all people of Bombu. And we are all people of what we call the three poisons. And the three poisons are greed, anger, and ignorance. So for us, we say that there's no decision that can be made that isn't colored by the three poisons. That's because we're not enlightened beings. If we're enlightened beings, then we could do a decision that isn't greed, anger, and ignorance. But any decision that we make in life has greed, anger, and ignorance in it. So say I want to take a drink of my hopped green tea here. So sparkling hop tea, the green tea one, it's got mosaic hops in it. This was made in Boulder, Colorado. And I just bought it down the street here. So this is literally down the street from where we live now. It's really good too. So let's speak of my greed, anger, and ignorance as I drink this. So I was greedy. So instead of giving my money to the person begging on the street as I was walking down to get this, I bought this. Like I could have survived without this, but instead, I was greedy and I was like, oh, it's mine. So I go in and I buy it. The environmental impact of this aluminum can is quite high. Now it is recyclable and it is a ball can and we do have a big recycling plant near Boulder. But the point is this green tea with hops in it came from Boulder, Colorado. It didn't materialize here. It came on a truck or an airplane. The 1,400 miles we just drove here so I could drink it in Cleveland. So that goes back to the fracking I did prior. So it probably used the oil and gas that I helped frack earlier. So I was both greedy and ignorant. And I'll be honest, when I opened it up, it wasn't quite as sweet as I wanted, so I was a little angry about that. So this decision to have this hop green tea has all the three poisons in it, greed, anger, and ignorance. So if I can't have a beverage without my greed, anger, and ignorance in it, how could I tell someone they could be straight or gay? Like, I can't even drink this green tea without that. And that's the Jodo Shinshu position on this. It's like, I don't know, man. I'm human. I can't make a justification on that. And so, through history, we've had a lot of prominent LGBT people within Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. But I can only think of one right now. So George Takei, Mr. Sulu, he's a member of the LA Betsuin, one of our temples here. So, hey, Star Trek. Yeah, really? No Star Trek fans here? Okay, cool. Yeah, so George Takei is a member of our faith group and our tradition. And we married him long before gay marriage was legal in this country. And we've been marrying LGBT people to the point that we've been marrying anybody. Most of the marriage ceremony here that we use in the United States was made up here because we don't marry people in temples in Japan. That's done in the Shinto shrines. And I can't really speak to their marriage traditions, but I know plenty of Shinto priests that marry LGBT people. It's not really done within Jodo Shinshu temples. It is a little bit now, but they actually imported the marriage ceremony from the US. So we're importing traditions from here. It goes this way. So, yeah, sweet. That is 40 minutes of me talking, and I apologize. But hopefully that helps a little bit. And yeah, and we'll open it up to questions, comments, or concerns. All three are valid.
Okay. I know many of you are just concerned that you don't want to ask a question because you might think it's inappropriate, but don't feel that way. It is appropriate because this is a confusing topic because many people have always had opinions about gay people and their place within religion. So here's a chance. Reverend Caitlin is willing to tackle any question you have.
You have a captive gay, it's fine.
Question?
Yeah.
I know you had questions before. Would you like to ask one?
I
Okay, let me ask you one.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you one that I think that's probably floating around in people who are live streaming as well as people here in the room.
Okay.
You talked about us being bonbu, foolish human beings
Yeah.
with greed, anger, and ignorance.
Yeah.
And so who am I to judge,
Yeah.
basically? However, and this might not necessarily just be towards any individual group, but then how do we, living in a society, a civil society, evaluate and judge behavior that we don't consider appropriate as a society? Because there's a judgment in terms of Shin Buddhism, and then there's a judgment in societal.
Yes. Oh, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, I can just talk, right? Cool. All right, so the division between divine judgment, I hate the word divine because it doesn't actually apply here, but it works for this specific, and secular judgment, they're both the same and separate. So one of our great teachers, about 300 years after Shinran Shonin, he wrote something, and at the end of one of these things, he talks about onokite, which is a Japanese word for follow the rules. Because we can ignore, like we could try to ignore the rules and say like, I'm a good Buddhist and I'm gonna follow the rules that make me a good Buddhist, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be the same rules that makes me a good, like, I don't know, New Mexican. You know, so I'm gonna go buy beer on Sundays, which is against the law in New Mexico. And so, you know, that makes me a pariah with my own culture. But it doesn't necessarily said, oh, you can't do that as a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism doesn't define someone's ethics, but it does help guide you with how you want to interact with people. So one of our goals as a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist is I want to have other people to be happy like I am. So the teachings make me happy because it helps me see myself as I truly am. So I look in the mirror and I look and I'm like, oh wow, all right, I'm kind of a schmuck. That's cool. I'm happy with that. We can live with that. Like that's me seeing myself as I truly am. But it's a little harder to see myself if I am not like part of the society I'm in. Is that going the right direction? I kind of forgot the question again, right?
How do we differentiate between non-judgment as a Jodo Shinshu practitioner and judgment in societal in terms of what is acceptable, not in terms of even global politics and what's going on in the world right now, because there's a large segment of the global population who's identifying one national leader as evil.
Oh, yes, okay. So the Zelensky-Putin question. So I'm gonna go ahead and like add this up. I can make a decision as a human being that doesn't necessarily mean it speaks for my religion, even as a priest. So like I just worked with my temple to raise money to send a bunch of medical supplies to the people of Ukraine, which is great. But I'm also not sending them to Russians right now because I have decided that I personally have made a moral choice. That being said, it doesn't mean that the teachings of Jodo Shinshu are any less available to the Russians as they are to the Ukrainians. So if Vladimir Putin said, I am going to 100% dedicate myself to the teachings of Jodo Shinshu from here on out and focus and say, Namo Amida Butsu, and do all of the teachings that we do, and truly and utterly mean it, he would have the exact same results as me as a Buddhist priest. But the difference is he would have to do that. And in doing that, you're removing a lot of like what makes Vladimir Putin Vladimir Putin. And so, as Shinran said, if the good person can be born in the Pure Land, how much more so can the bad person? He's, you know, in this case, the bad person, as we're deciding here from the information that we have and everything else. So that teaching, like our teaching basically says they can be allowed. That being said, we don't have to like everybody. This isn't a teaching where like everyone has to be friends. You can still be like, hey, my opinion is you're not a great person, But that doesn't mean I can say you don't deserve salvation within the context of our religious framework.
Thank you, Reverend Kate. Well, that sounds like causes and conditions and genetics that we come with and don't have much. And have another question over here.
Are there any outreach attempts that are being made by your community to college campuses, which are probably more available than younger kids who realize that they are part of your alphabet soup,
Yeah.
okay, and may not be as comfortable because they're still within the confines of their home? Because kids need to be comfortable with themselves, know there's a community that is accepting, and give them whatever structure they need so that they can lead a more satisfying, emotionally healthy life.
So it's just happening now. So Reverend Koe Umezu is the Kaikyoshi minister at the West LA Temple in LA, California. She's also now the new head of campus ministry for Honganji temples in the US. So they're working on projects now to hit college campuses. I know that she's working with like UCLA and USC right now as our first things, because the majority of our population, majority of the Jodo Shinshu temples are in California. So they're focusing on that first. On the other side, I'm a Twitch streamer, and I guess you guys probably don't know what that is. I stream online video games within a large community of basically 20s and 30-somethings and teens. And I do something called Buddhist Priest Plays. So I literally play video games and talk about Buddhism and like universal inclusivity and everything else as I'm playing video games, specifically targeting teenagers, 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. So I do YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram and Twitch, exactly. Like right now I'm streaming live on Facebook over here on one of my second channels, as we're also streaming there, specifically to engage with those populations. Because I can tell you, as a young LGBT member, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, I felt super, super, super isolated. I know my wife has had some of the same conversations with me about that, like feeling super, super isolated and not feeling like I was in an environment. When I first came out, my family wasn't supportive. They came around really quickly, but like, there was like a couple months there where I felt super alone. And I wish I would have had a religious environment where I felt that I could go and be welcome and be safe. And we have, at my temple in Denver, we're a pretty large temple. So we have a good representation of LGBT kids within our youth groups. And in fact, we'll be marching in the Denver Pride Parade at the end of May, once again this year, finally after 2 years of pandemic restrictions. And we do those kind of activities in order to make those kids feel that they are welcome within the temple space. Because there's always cultural aspects of like immigrant communities that want their kids to, be super safe in an environment and also to have more kids and those kind of cultural pressures and everything else. And so that's one of the things that we're overcoming as well. It's like, you can still have a family if your kids are gay. It's okay, I promise.
We have here on campus at Case Western Reserve University, right next door, we have an LGBT office.
Oh, nice.
And there's an active community. And if you look at all the flyers as you walk through campus, you'll see activities that are going on. So it is available on college campuses. And I know that we, as Cleveland Buddhist Temple, need to get more involved with that.
Yeah.
Any last questions before we break for a reception? Reverend
like 12
Caitlin.
minutes, we can do it. Come on.
Reverend Caitlin.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Please join me in thanking Reverend Caitlin.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. We have an online question. My question would be if there's any specific thoughts toward the trans population.
Sure.
We are the target of horrifying violence in our country at the moment, so it's hot on my mind. I don't, however, know whether Japan or our schools has any thoughts on my identity as a trans woman. Okay. Thank you from the questioner. Reverend Caitlin, will you answer that?
Absolutely. The transgender community is absolutely being persecuted right now throughout the country. They're a target of violence and a lack of acceptance throughout the United States. And so you have my deepest sympathies, and I wish I could do more to protect you. Outside of that, let's talk about gender equality within Jodo Shinshu. And I think that the gender equality question is wide-ranging. And as a trans person, first thing I can tell you is you are 100% accepted within Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Now, that being said, you're going to run into bigots because bigots exist. There's not much we can do about that. So I'm going to dive into scripture for just a second, and then we're going to work our way back out. So there's the 48 vows that we talk about within Jodo Shinshu, come from the larger sutra of Amida Buddha. And the 35th vow says, if any woman who takes refuge in me and dearly wants to be born in my land, will be born, they will be born as a man. Yeah, that sounds messed up, right? All right, so basically what that's saying is any woman who practices the Pure Land teachings was guaranteed to be born a man in the next life. Okay, so let's contextualize what that means for a moment. So the larger sutra is written in India in 500-600 BC. BCE, before Common Era, not before Christ. And it was kind of really horrible to be a woman back then. Like, you were property. And all the way up into now in certain Indian cultures, the wife will actually be sacrificed at the death of the husband, amongst other things. And so like being a woman was pretty horrible. And so for people that were taking refuge in this sutra and everything else, you will be equal to those that oppress you in your next life. But also, you will be equal to those that oppress you now. So as you engage with the teachings, as you say, do our practice, which is Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite light and life, Naman Dabutsu, Naman Dabutsu, and all the different aspects of Jodo Shinshu practice, you are entering into this relationship with the Buddha and with the Sangha and with the Dharma. And so you are now being fulfilled within these vows. And that vow, the 35th vow, says, you'll be born as a man. It also then says, you will be seen as equal. Because there's another vow that actually talks about the lack of form within birth after this life, which basically negates this whole you'll be born a man thing. It's comfort saying that you will be equal. Thusly, your ability to engage with the teachings is equal. Thusly, as a trans woman, you are equal as anyone else. Nobody is outside the teachings, and no one is less made for the teachings than another person. I can't control how people treat you because people are people, and they all work from this Bombu place, this greed, anger, and ignorance. But within the teachings and the religion and the actual living aspects of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, trans people are 100% equal from everyone else. You will never, ever, ever not be embraced by the vow. Naman Dabutsu, Naman Dabutsu. Thank you.
Caitlin.
Sorry, I got a little
Thank
punchy.
you. And any further questions, please feel free to send them in on chat, and Reverend Caitlin will send them via chat.
Nice.
Thank you.